I am so excited to introduce our next guest, Dr. Darin Ingels. He has a practice in California, and he does so much work with so many of our families. I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Always my pleasure, Kristen.
So I know today we're going to talk about allergies and how important that is. But before we start, can you talk a little bit about how you got into helping families with autism?
Sure. Well, it's kind of came sort of serendipitously. I was working with a friend of mine who practices in New York City, who's a homeopathic practitioner. She recovered her son using homotoxicology, and she called me out of the blue one day and said, hey, I have a lot of kids I'm working with who needs a doctor to help care for them in ways that she can't. Would it be okay if I started sending kids your way? And it ended up being 8 to 10 kids a week. Wow. So I'm one of these doctors. I don't have a child on the spectrum, but as my practice started filling up, and my background really is as a naturopathic doctor and an environmental medicine doctor, and it became very clear very quickly that some of these kids are really being impacted by these various things in their environment that are influencing their mood, their behavior, their cognition, their language. So I really wasn't doing anything different with them than I was doing with my other patients that had asthma and allergies and eczema. Fundamentally, it's really getting down to how do we change their immune system in a way that works for them instead of against them. Because I think so many things we're seeing with our kids on the spectrum is really how their immune system's being impacted. And if we can start to change that, we start to see all these nice things that come thereafter.
And now, is your practice solely in California now? I know you used to be on the East Coast as well.
Yeah, I used to have multiple practices, and now my practice is just here in Irvine, California.
Irvine, California, but you help families all over the world, correct?
Right, yeah.
And so today we're going to talk about allergies, and we're not just talking about food allergies or seasonal allergies. We're going to talk about kind of like the overload in general of allergies.
Right.
And so let's give a definition of what is an allergy.
So an allergy is really it's an overreaction of your immune system. Your immune system is reacting to something that's a normal part of your environment or your child's environment. So, there's a lot of people who get exposed to mold and pollen and dust, and they get no symptoms whatsoever. And there's other people, if they get around it, they sneeze, they get watery eyes, they cough, or they get some sort of other systemic reaction. So the biggest difference is, if the exposure is equal, what's the difference between one group of people that become symptomatic and another group of people that don't? And really, it's the immune system. So we get into very complex immunology about what triggers that. But basically, your immune system at some point can start to overreact to these normal things. And that's when, you start getting all the symptoms. So ultimately, we use this concept in environmental medicine as a barrel. We're all born with a barrel. But some people have a big barrel and some people have a shot glass. And when the glass overflows or the barrel overflows, that's when people become symptomatic. So when we talk about allergies or sensitivities, it's very easy to kind of think of them as sort of these isolated things that I've got food allergies, I've got mold allergy or pollen. But in reality, I've got food and mold and pollen and cat and dog. They just keep adding up. So what's really different from person to person is that threshold. Where's your threshold? Where's that point when the barrel overflows and then you become really symptomatic? And again, that can be a function of genetics. We know that there's a big familial genetic disposition for allergy. If one parent has had allergies, there's a 25% chance the child will have allergies. If both parents are allergic, it goes up to about 80%. So we've got that genetic underlying, and then it's just a function of what the exposure is. And then, of course, if you've got infection, if you've got other external factors that can influence your immune system, that sometimes will set that off. And actually pregnancy. The fact of being pregnant does so much to change your immune system. I've seen moms that never had an allergy in their life, and after they deliver their child, now they're allergic to everything. And I've also seen the opposite. Moms who were terribly allergic, after they deliver, all their allergies go away completely. So there's a big immune shift during pregnancy itself. So when we start, looking at all these different factors, we're then trying to establish, okay, what are the different triggers? And if we can identify them, then we can kind of move forward with specific treatment to start desensitizing people to those allergens.
Well, I know with seasonal allergies, at least, they're definitely seasonal, correct?
Right.
And so I feel like we're in September as we're recording this right now. I feel like this is a high time for allergies and asthmatic type symptoms. Is that correct?
Right. So for people who have an allergic disposition, depending on where you live in the world, like in California here, our seasons are pretty stable. We're not like the East Coast where we get bitterly cold and humid in the summertime. So depending on where you are in the world, the outdoor stuff will change. Your pollen, typically in the United States, tree pollen comes in the spring, grass pollen in the summer, weed pollen in the fall. Mold, depending on where you are in the country, can be year-round. Food is typically year-round because people tend to eat the same kind of things. So for people who complain that, I only get, itchy eyes, sneezing in April, May, pretty good idea that it's probably related to tree pollen. People who start getting sick this time of year on, could be ragweed, could be mold. So, when your symptoms get worse gives us a pretty good clue about what kind of things you're exposed to. But of course, you can always test people and find out very specifically what triggers them.
And the thing is, with a child with autism, often they can't talk
Right.
or express, I should say, to the level that they could, let us know something's going wrong or they're not feeling right.
Right.
And it could not just be where it's the normal, swollen eyes, runny nose. They could be having other symptoms. Is that correct?
Right. So, in some cases, especially for kids who aren't verbal and can't express how they're feeling, we'll see a lot of those physical signs of being allergic. So some of the telltale signs, of course, the dark circles under the eyes, I can tell you it's never lack of sleep. It's always allergy. It doesn't tell you what the allergen is, but it is a sign of allergy. The other thing you'll see in kids is look at these lines underneath their eyelids. They look like age lines, something you would see in an 80-year-old person. That's also called Denny's lines. That's also a sign of allergy. Skin rashes, eczema, that's a sign of allergy. For kids who are constantly pressing their belly can be a sign they're having some sort of abdominal or intestinal reaction. That can be allergy. The ones that are really hard, and if you've listened to Dr. Theorides talk, he talks a lot about how a lot of kids on the spectrum get these cells in their brain called mast cells, which are the cells that release histamine and all these chemicals that trigger allergy. They get a massive release in their brain. So when they get allergic, they don't get hay fever. They don't get the itchy eyes and runny nose. Their symptoms come out neurologically. So this, I think, as a parent, could be very challenging because if your child's having behavior problems, sleep problems, learning disabilities, there's a lot of reasons that can happen, but one of the things we have to rule out is the possibility of allergy. And unfortunately, we don't have a way of measuring that reaction in the brain. We have to look at it more externally, but we can still get a sense about whether they're having reactions to food, mold, or pollen. But again, their reaction may be very neurological, and you might not see some of these other signs. But I think when you see the classic child that has the dark circles under the eyes, those lines, sometimes you'll see this little crease across the bridge of the nose. We call it the allergic salute because they're constantly, sniffling all day long. Red ears is a very common sign of allergic reaction, or red cheeks. So when you start to see those physical signs, you have a pretty good idea. But I think it's always wise to, do some form of testing to try and figure out what's bothering them.
Now, do they do similar testing when you're looking at allergies? I assume you have a whole panel of different things where food allergies kind of come into play. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to try and figure out, what a child's reacting to. Unfortunately, in the United States, the definition of allergy is pretty limited. It refers to one very specific type of immune reaction, which we call IgE, or immunoglobulin E. This is the antibody that we associate with those kind of reactions that are anaphylactic or very dangerous. So for the child that eats the peanut and their face swells and they can't breathe, that's IgE that mediates that. For other kids that are allergic to pollen and dust and cat and dog, again, it's typically this IgE molecule that's involved. If you start reading European journals, the definition of allergy gets much broader. So they really define it as any immune reaction, not just IgE reactions. So if you go to your allergist and you get skin scratch testing or skin prick testing, they're really only measuring IgE reactions. They're not measuring these other type of reactions. So it's good sometimes to look at other methods that might be a bit more comprehensive in measuring all the different kind of reactions that are available. And with food in particular, food sensitivities or food intolerances can be a little bit more challenging to pick up because it doesn't come up on IgE testing. But you can do a food elimination diet, which is the gold standard to figure out if people are reacting to food. And that's something that anyone can do at home.
Well, because allergies in general, they're going to cause inflammation in the body. We know inflammation is going to wreak havoc across the board. So now, what kind of testing do you do in your clinic?
So we do a combination because we're looking for a lot of different things. So sometimes we do conventional skin scratch or skin prick testing. We also do what's called skin patch testing. Skin patch testing is kind of like scratch testing, but instead of breaking the skin, we put the antigen on top of the skin and leave it there for a while and see how the skin reacts. And then sometimes we'll do other types of testing that's probably a bit more esoteric, but we use a biofeedback system. And again, because there's no one way that's looking at all reactions, sometimes we're doing combinations of tests just to try to figure out, cast the widest net of what we think people are reacting to.
And so now, is it possible when a child, maybe doesn't show up on that test, do we look at the symptoms and try to treat that as well?
Yeah, sometimes, in some cases, you'll get this collection of symptoms. You might think it's related to a specific allergen. You test for it and nothing comes back. There is a small percentage of people that have what are called idiosyncratic reactions, where you could test it 1,000 ways to Sunday, nothing ever comes up positive, and then you start treating and it gets better. So because there's a lot of ways to approach allergy treatment, the most specific kind is what's called immunotherapy, where you're actually treating, if they're allergic to ragweed or dog, you're now treating those specific allergens. But there's other more non-specific ways where, regardless of what allergy bothers them, there are different nutrients, different herbs we can use to try and help mitigate those effects.
And so how soon does a child of any age, by the way, when I say child, those listening or watching, it doesn't matter if you're 2 or 52, correct?
Exactly.
And so how fast, if they are being treated for either a seasonal allergy or a food allergy, how fast does that body kind of recover with that inflammation that's already taken place?
Yeah, so when we're doing immunotherapy with our patients, we can see clinical improvement within weeks. Sometimes it happens very quickly. To get to a point, though, where you don't need to do any type of treatment at all, realistically, sometimes that takes a lot longer. If people are doing immunotherapy, much like if you go to the allergist and you're doing allergy shots, they'll tell you it's 7 to 9 years of treatment.
Oh my goodness, really?
Yes.
Wow.
So, again, you could be clinically better sooner than that, but to get to a point where your immune system's stable, so ours is a little faster, but still, people are into it for the long haul. Again, we can see clinical improvement sometimes within days to weeks, but to get to a point where their immune system's stable and set, sometimes it does take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So people need to prepare that when you're dealing with allergies, there are very few things that change it quickly.
And it's interesting because sometimes kids are allergic to everything under the sun, but yet a mom or a dad, the parents of that child don't seem to have any allergies. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, for parents that have no history of allergy and we start to see that their children have it, probably just a function, again, of total load, what their exposure has been. Perhaps the children have different exposure than the parents did. I think one of the biggest things I've seen in my practice is the school systems. A lot of the schools have a lot of toxic exposures between mold and chemicals they use in the school. So if you have a child who's in a school that's basically toxic, the parents aren't in that school environment, we're going to see a lot of these allergies and symptoms come out in their kids, where not necessarily with the parents. So things like that are probably some of the biggest things why we see differences in kids versus the adults.
Is there anything that a family can do in their home to kind of bring down the risk factor for certain allergies, especially when you're talking about like the mold and, just different things in their environment?
Yeah, we want the home to be a safe haven as much as possible. And I think there's a lot of things people can do that are very inexpensive and easy to do. You can start by getting rid of all your, toxic cleaning chemicals. Anything, that's a known toxin, get rid of, replace it with something more natural that's going to be safer. So that way when you're breathing this in, it's not damaging your body. So, get rid of the Windex and the 409 and the Tilex, and, go to the Whole Foods or your local health food store, and you can find these natural products that are going to be safer for you and your whole family. That's really simple and easy for anybody to do. I think beyond that, if there's any risk of having mold in the household, which is one of the biggest risk factors I see for our kids, because mold has such an impact on their brain. If you've ever been suspicious of a leaking pipe, a leaking roof, there's something in the bathroom's been dripping and you've just been ignoring it, take note of that and deal with it. There are companies out there that you can have your home tested. The range is pretty wide on how much it costs depending on where you live in the country. Here in Orange County, it's pretty expensive, but elsewhere in the country, it's not so bad. But I think it's a healthy investment for the family, because if there's mold in the home, it's dangerous. It has killed people. So, we don't take it very lightly. And I think because our kids are so sensitive and susceptible, we want to make sure that that's not something that's constantly undermining their health, because you could be spending all this time and money doing these great therapies to help your child recover. But if they're constantly being exposed to something that's undermining that, you're just not going to make the kind of headway you'd like. So, make sure that, you get rid of the chemicals. Check for mold if you're suspicious. The bedroom in particular, we want to be a very safe place for our kids. So that means, get rid of all the electronics, get rid of all the stuffed animals, make sure that the only thing in their bedroom really is a bed and, whatever else is necessary, because all that other stuff can impact their quality of sleep. And our kids need good sleep. All that healthy tissue repair, cellular repair happens when we get deep sleep. So if our kids aren't sleeping well, it's going to be, again, really hard for the body to recover the way we'd like. So I think those are some very, simple, easy things to do that anybody can do for their home. And that just starts to lay the foundation of making it safer for everybody.
What's your thoughts on air purifiers? Do those seem to help?
Yeah, air purifiers, particularly if you know that you're sensitive to mold, pollen, dust, these purifiers are very effective at pulling all those spores out of the air, pulls pollen out of the air, dust. So, again, there's a gradation of, really expensive air filters and less expensive. but I think any of them are going to be helpful in at least lowering the load in the house. So I recommend that people, get a smaller air filter, even if they have central air system where it's doing the whole house. It's a big volume of air. It's actually very hard to clean as efficiently, where the smaller units, if you put it in one room like the bedroom, it's really going to help clean out that air. It's going to drop that load, and it just makes it, again, a safer place for people to sleep.
I love that. Now, how do people find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing or if they want to visit your practice?
Sure. So they can find us online. My website is DarinIngelsND.com. That's DarinIngelsND.com. And all of our information, all of our social media links, if you just click through, are there. So we'd love for people to sign up for our email list. We've got a lot of great information on staying healthy, and we publish recipes fairly regularly. So we'd love for people to join us.
And what message do you want to leave the families watching with today?
Yeah, well, my message is always the same, is that there's always more you can do, and there's always hope. I think it's so hard when you've been doing this particularly for a while. So you've tried different therapies and just not seen the kind of success you'd like. There are so many things that are available. It's like every year I learn more and more about new things that are cropping up. So just don't give up, and keep trying new things, and eventually I think you'll find that combination that works best for your child.
I love that. Never give up. That just seems to be what all the doctors are saying. And I think that's so important, because if you guys give up, then what do we have? So thank you so much, Dr. Ingels, for being here today. And for everyone watching, remember what he said. Don't give up. There's always hope. All right. Until next time. Bye, guys.